Hello, welcome to the Psalming Effect. My name is John Smith. I minister for the Church of Christ in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And I'm going to share a meditation with you today from Psalms 74, and really from much of the psalm. It's a long psalm. I'm not going to read the whole thing, 23 verses. But before I jump into the psalm, I want to share with you the story that from my life that I reflect on as I read this psalm. When I was young, our family used to travel a lot, and especially during the years when I was about 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and all the way to 12, we traveled a lot. During that period of time, we went for a holiday down. I was raised in Winnipeg. We traveled down into South Dakota and North Dakota and South Dakota. You get to North Dakota first, coming down from Canada, and then we also made a vacation down all the way to Colorado, to the city of Denver. My dad at that time was investigating where he would go for training for full-time ministry, and so he was investigating Bear Valley School of Preaching in Colorado. But where we ended up going when I was 10 years old was to Texas, Lubbock, Texas, where my dad enrolled at the Sunset School of Preaching. Not many of you may know what that is, but I'm just telling you about how much the distances we traveled. So anyways, this was of course in the days before GPS and Google Maps and those kinds of things. And so you were very dependent on, well, your printed road maps, but you were also, perhaps more than now, very dependent on the road signs. My favorite thing to do, and I enjoyed these long trips, my favorite thing to do, and when I tell you this, you're going to realize how long ago this was. We had a big Pontiac sedan that didn't have a bench but had two bucket seats. It was really a nice car. It was a sports coupe actually, because it just had the two doors, but it was a full size car, and a 1967. Okay, so that'll give you a little bit of context of the time period, and we got it brand new, and so whenever we went out on these long road trips, my place to sit in the vehicle was on the map box, or I don't think they called this one the glove box, the console in between the bucket seats. There was, of course, in front of me the shifter where you put the car into whatever gear you wanted it to be in. It was an automatic, but the map box was just behind it. Well, I sat on the map box. Of course, there's no seat belt there, but there was no seatbelt law then, and we didn't worry about those things back then. Maybe we should have. And anyways, that's where I sat. I was a small kid, even at 10, 11 years old, and I would sit there and leave the back seat to my older sister. And while I sat there, the thing that I did was I had the printed map in my hand, and I would watch. I would watch the road and the landmarks, and especially whenever we came into a town, I would take note of the sign which said which town it was, and so then I would check my road map, and I'd see what town it was, and then I'd see, okay, so what's the next town going to be, and as we're leaving one town, and there'd be another sign, that would now tell you how far it was to the next town. And so I would find that on the map, and I would follow our route, and I'd see things on the map like we're going to go by this lake, or we're going to cross this river, and we get to those places, and anyways, I would track our journey, and it was I just found it really fascinating to do as a young kid. I just enjoyed doing that. It was good, but I watched the road signs very carefully, but it always threw me off if I missed a road sign. because then I wouldn't know, well, how far is it to this next place on the map? How close are we to it? How far have we come from the place where we were? I don't know. I'm not sure where we are now, until I saw another road sign. We were very dependent on our signs, much more then than we are now. Now that we have, like I said, GPS, which tells us, when to turn, and some of them even tell you which lane to be in, and all of that, or Google Maps, which gives you whatever details really that you ask for. So what does that have to do with Psalm 74? Well, here's what we read in 74, Psalm 74, starting at verse 9. We do not see our signs. There is no longer any prophet, and there is none among us who knows how long. How long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. In a figurative sense, we depend on our signs. Those of us who are believers in God, we study His Word, we pray, we follow the inclinations of the Holy Spirit. We try to follow the will of God as He's leading us through life. And He gives us signs. He opens and closes doors. He answers prayer. He says yes sometimes. He says no sometimes. He reveals His will to us, especially through His Word. That's our roadmap. That's our guide that helps us to know where we are. But we look for the signs. But sometimes, and the psalmist is talking about what happened there. They went through a period of time. In fact, the Israelites went through several periods of time where they weren't hearing from the prophets, where God was not happy with them. God was not speaking to them. God was letting them just kind of experience the consequences of, as it turned out, their bad choices. He let them wander without His guidance for a while, until finally they longed to have and to hear from God again and be led by Him, to have His guidance. And then, of course, He would send another prophet or reveal Himself in some way and reestablish His will, and the people would come back to the covenant that God had made with them. Now, it wasn't that God ever broke the covenant. It was that the people did. God is faithful, but the people often are not. We sometimes feel the way the psalmist feels as well. We do not see our signs. What we're seeing is our circumstances where we're suffering, or we're seeing the situation of the world in which we live, or we're seeing our church being challenged with things and maybe dwindling, and we're thinking, what's happening here, God? Give us a word, give us a sign. And we haven't seen one for a while, one that helps us understand what's happening. We keep searching His Word, we keep praying, and we keep wondering. I'm thinking about the conflict that's going on in Ukraine. I don't think any of us knew when it started how long it would last. People made some predictions, but is it going to last 6 months? Is it going to last 6 years? We don't know. And what's the outcome going to be? Is the Ukraine going to be completely absorbed by Russia? Is it going to be completely an independent country the way it was up until all of this started happening recently? Or is it going to end up being parceled and losing some of its territory to its enemy and being shrunk into a smaller geographical area, we don't know. And how many lives will be lost, and how much suffering, and how the world is going to deal with it, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and especially for the people who are suffering in the middle of it, they must be asking the same kind of questions that the psalmist is here. We do not see our signs. Well, what's going on, God? Tell us what's happening and what we should do, and help us understand. And we get that way sometimes in life. And the psalmist expresses it very well throughout the whole psalm. Remember, let me just read the last part of the psalm, starting at verse 18. Remember this, O Lord, how the enemy scoffs, and a foolish people reviles your name. Do not deliver the soul of your dove to the wild beasts. Do not forget the life of your poor forever. Have regard for the covenant, for the dark places of the land are full of the habitations of violence. Let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, O God, defend your cause. Remember how the foolish scoff at you all the day. Do not forget the clamor of your foes, the uproar of those who rise against you, which goes up continually. So, this could have application to a lot of things that we might be going through, that our country might be going through. It could have to do with the moral crisis that we're going through, or like in the Ukraine, the military, warfare crisis that they're going through. It has lots of application here. But what I think is really important is that while this is a psalm of complaint, and it's worth noting that God welcomes our complaint, he wants us to talk to him. He wants us to turn to him, especially if we have not been in tune with him. But even if we are, but we're just not understanding what's happening, and we're going through a bunch of suffering and difficult things, and where are the signs, we're asking, and God hasn't shown any for a while. Nevertheless, let's not lose our faith and our trust in God. And the psalmist, in fact, in the middle of this, it's a 23 verse psalm, but embedded in the middle of it is a statement of his faith. And I would hope that during our times, we would have this faith as well. Starting at verse 12, this is what he says. Yet God my King is from of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. You split open springs and brooks. You dried up ever-flowing streams. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You have established the heavenly lights and the sun. You have fixed all the boundaries of the earth. You have made summer and winter. I love that. The psalmist is affirming his faith that the Lord is the Lord of the night and the day, of the summer and the winter. He's the one that dries up the floods. He's the one that causes and creates the flow and the rivers to begin with. He is in control of all things. And, it's relevant to me at the moment. I'm not in the middle of a war or in the middle of a health crisis or something like that. But my basement got flooded this week. Here in Weyburn, we had quite a severe rain. I guess it's a week ago now. But we've been dealing with it for a week, having to take everything out of our basement. Our carpet flooring has been ruined, and and even as I talk about it, it's like, at least you have a house to live in, and there's a lot of things I could complain about, I guess, that don't compare with what some people in this world could complain about. Nevertheless, I find myself looking for the signs. Okay, what do we need to do here? How much should we really invest in this house in which we live? How much longer are we going to live in this house? Do we need to seek something else? Do we need to renovate and restore this thing to what's going to be practical for us? Or should it be more with a view towards what will sell to someone else, because that might be close on the horizon? I don't see any signs right now to tell me exactly where I am in that journey. But you know what? God is in control. I'm not shaken in my faith at all. God is still the God of day and the God of night and the God of summer and the God of winter, the God of drought and the God of floods, the God of a basement that needs to be stripped and restored, and the God of a house that well supplies the needs of my wife and I and our ministry here in Weyburn. And so that's the encouragement I take from the psalm. I would encourage you to spend some time this week in Psalm 74. And if you don't have a personal crisis of your own that's causing you to say, as the psalmist says in the first verse, "Oh God, why do you cast us off forever?" Maybe you're not crying out in that way, but at least think about the world situation, this pandemic which we've been in, and hopefully is becoming a past thing. I mentioned the war, but there's lots of other things going on around the world. But think about that God is still in control. Where is your faith at? And how is your faith dealing with what comes across on the news? The moral situation of the society in which you live, is it changing? Are the opponents of God seeming to take more and more of the agenda away from the truth? Maybe that's affecting you, or maybe it's bothering you that that's happening, whether or not it's specifically impacting you. All of that can be meditated upon, but your faith strengthened, and your complaint heard by God in a positive way. Like, I would say, spend some time in Psalm 74 this week and let it build your faith and trust in God. Ask him, where are the signs? Maybe you're just missing the signs. Maybe you just need to look a little more closely at the map and figure out where you are. Or maybe it's okay, you don't need to know. You just need to trust in the God who is in charge of all. God's grace is for you in 2022.